So if a woman in her 50s changes her name on LinkedIn to a man's name, her visibility jumps by over 800%.
Right? 800%.
Like, same exact resume, same career history, same expertise. The only thing that changes is that gender marker.
Which, immediately tells us something crucial. It tells us that what this demographic is experiencing, it isn't a crisis of confidence.
Right.
It's not a loss of ambition, and it is definitely not a midlife crisis. It is a mathematical, algorithmic erasure.
Exactly. I mean, usually when we talk about a structural failure like in civil engineering or architecture, you don't blame the individual brick for cracking.
No, of course not.
You don't look at a collapsed steel beam and say, well, that beam just didn't have enough resilience. It just lost its ambition to hold up the roof.
Right. You check the blueprints, you look at the load-bearing walls.
Exactly. You calculate the sheer weight that was placed on that specific point.
Yeah.
And you look at the environmental stressors that the structure was literally never designed to withstand.
Right. And it's categorized immediately as a failure of design,
Sure.
not a failure of character on the part of the building materials.
But when we step into the world of women's careers, specifically women in midlife, that basic rational logic just completely evaporates.
It just vanishes.
Yeah. We look at a woman who is exhausted, who is maybe stepping back from her career, who is physically and mentally depleted, and the societal verdict is almost always, well, she couldn't handle it. She opted out.
It is entirely reframed as a personal defect, an
Right.
individual moral failing, really, rather than what the data shows it actually is, which is a catastrophic architectural failure of the system she was forced to operate within.
Right.
And that distinction, that fundamental shift from personal blame to structural analysis, that is the foundational premise of everything we're discussing today.
Which brings us to the entire mission of this deep dive. Because if you are listening to this right now, you are likely sitting there with the Matriarchs field manual and the Recover Companion workbook right in front of you.
Yeah.
And we need to be incredibly clear right out of the gate about what this audio is and what it isn't. We are not here to summarize the text for you. You have it in your hands.
Right, you can read it.
Exactly. We are not going to walk you through the mechanics of the exercises, step by step, like some kind of audio tutorial.
No, our role here is to really get underneath the text, to deepen your understanding of why this specific foundational work exists in the first place.
Yeah.
We want to explore what it is genuinely asking of you and what becomes possible when you actually truly engage with it.
Right, because the manual is broken into 3 phases, right? Recover, rise, and reign. And today, we are entirely focused on recover.
Just recover, yeah.
Yeah,
And we need to set the tone for this right now. This is not a self-help space.
definitely not.
This is not a motivational seminar where you're going to be told to practice self-care or go take a bubble bath and just manifest positive thoughts.
Right, no toxic positivity here.
Exactly. Society has fundamentally misdiagnosed you, and they have misdiagnosed this phase of your life.
Yeah, that's such a critical point.
The central argument of this deep dive and of the manual sitting in front of you is that you did not fail the system.
The system failed you.
The system, which was designed entirely around a linear male default life cycle, had absolutely no framework for you. The design worked exactly as it was intended to work, but the cost was entirely absorbed by you.
Which is why we really have to strip away the cultural baggage attached to the word recovery. Because, I mean, that word has been totally hijacked by the wellness industry.
Oh, completely. It's come to imply resting or just getting over it or quietly moving on.
Right, moving on. But in the context of this manual, recover is, well, it's a forensic instrument.
It is.
It's this act of defiance where you accurately name what happened to you and you actively redistribute the blame back to the systemic design failure.
Yes. You are recovering an accurate account of your history. You are recovering your own assessment of yourself from an economy that completely misread you.
It is a highly structural evidentiary exercise. But I do want to push back a little here, or at least play devil's advocate. If we blame the system entirely for what happens in midlife, aren't we stripping women of their personal agency?
That's a common question, yeah.
Like, where is the line between recognizing a structural failure and just needing to build better personal boundaries? We are so culturally conditioned to look for the fix, the pivot, the 3 steps to bounce back.
Right, we love a quick fix.
So why is it structurally dangerous for the listener to skip this forensic work and just jump straight into the rise phase?
That is the most common pushback to this work, by far. And it comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what agency actually is.
Okay, unpack that.
True agency requires an accurate map of reality. You cannot have agency if you are constantly blaming yourself for the effects of gravity.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
If you try to build a new professional configuration on top of internalized self-blame, you are literally building a skyscraper on a sinkhole. If you move into the rise phase, carrying the institutional narrative that you failed, you will build your next chapter on a completely false foundation. You'll negotiate from a place of deficit.
You'll price your services based on a subconscious apology.
Exactly. Stabilizing the ground requires proving to yourself with hard evidence that the collapse was structural. You cannot evaluate your own assets if the building is still on fire, and you think you're the one who lit the match.
Man, you cannot evaluate your assets if you think you lit the match. That is so powerful. So to accurately name what happened, we have to map the actual territory you have been navigating.
Yes, a territory that the official economy flat out refuses to acknowledge.
The manual calls this diagnostic framework the Convergence Window. So what does this window actually look like on a structural level?
Well, the Convergence Window is a highly predictable, statistically verifiable period. It typically occurs between the ages of 45 and 57.
Okay.
And this is the exact window where millions of women across the developed world exit the workforce. But they aren't exiting in one single dramatic moment of realization.
Right, it's not like flipping a switch.
No, it is a slow, grinding accumulation of impossibilities. The system looks at this exit and tries to categorize every single pressure as a distinct personal circumstance.
Like a health issue or an aging parent.
Exactly. Or a desire for more family time. But the data proves these aren't isolated bad breaks. This is a predictable structural collision of 6 simultaneous pressures.
6 simultaneous pressures. Let's walk through this collision, because seeing them all lined up, that's really the very first step in that forensic accounting.
Absolutely.
When the listener fills out the timeline exercise in section 1, she maps her history against these 6 pressures. So let's start with the first 2, which often hit at the exact same time. The biological and the neurological.
Right.
We have perimenopause colliding with, for many women, a late neurodivergent diagnosis. Just how physiological is this impact?
We really have to look at the clinical data here because it's undeniable. The manual cites Stanford research showing a sustained 10% reduction in earnings for women who visit a healthcare provider for menopause-related symptoms.
Wait, a 10% reduction in earnings just from visiting a doctor?
Yes. Just seeking help correlates with that drop. And we are looking at 90% of working women in perimenopause experiencing severe sleep disturbance.
90%? That's almost everyone.
Almost everyone. And 86% experience brain fog.
And brain fog sounds so, I don't know, it sounds like a gentle, poetic term.
It really does, but clinically, it is the direct impairment of working memory and executive function. 1 in 7 women lose more than 10 hours of productivity a week to this.
10 hours. That is the equivalent of losing an entire workday every single week.
Every single week. For a biological transition that can last anywhere from 4 to 12 years.
An entire workday a week just vanishing. And you are still expected to perform at a peak mid-career executive level.
Exactly.
And then, layered right on top of that massive metabolic drain, we have the late neurodivergent diagnosis. The JMIS psychiatry paper highlights a huge diagnostic gap here.
Yes, women are diagnosed with ADHD on average 12 years later than men.
12 years later. So that's over a decade of masking.
Over a decade.
How does this neurological reality intersect with the biological one?
The intersection of endocrinology and neurology here is just fascinating, but it is devastating if it goes unsupported.
Right.
Masking, forcing yourself to conform to neurotypical communication styles and workflows is not just some social habit. It is a highly metabolically expensive survival strategy. You are constantly overriding your brain's natural wiring.
That sounds exhausting.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, estrogen plays a critical role in modulating dopamine synthesis in the brain. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter responsible for focus, motivation, and executive function.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah. When perimenopause arrives and estrogen levels begin to fluctuate wildly and eventually plummet, the chemical scaffolding that allowed you to mask your ADHD or autism just completely collapses.
Wow. So it's not that a woman suddenly just can't handle her job. Her underlying biological infrastructure has fundamentally altered.
Precisely. It is a full-blown metabolic crisis. The fuel source has changed, but the engine is being asked to run at the exact same speed.
And the workplace doesn't see a metabolic crisis, do they?
No, they don't. They see a senior woman who suddenly seems quote-unquote unreliable or who is losing her edge. They see the symptom, not the system.
Right. As if your own biology and neurology entering a state of total rebellion isn't enough, the convergence window introduces the third pressure, which is caregiving.
Yes, the sandwich generation.
Exactly. You are part of the sandwich generation. You might be raising teenagers who obviously require immense emotional and logistical regulation while simultaneously managing the decline of aging parents.
It's an incredible load.
And the manual cites a staggering figure here, a $470 billion unpaid economic value in the U.S. alone, just for family caregiving.
That number represents a massive structural extraction of free labor.
Free labor, yeah.
The state and the official economy rely entirely on women in this specific age bracket to act as the ultimate social safety net.
Without paying them a dime.
Exactly. You are managing hospital discharge plans, you're decoding complex medical jargon, managing care home assessments, navigating financial power of attorney, and organizing sibling care schedules.
All of that.
And you are doing all of this while trying to show up for the Tuesday morning strategy meeting as if you didn't just spend the entire night in an emergency room.
Which brings us directly to the fourth and fifth pressures. Professional expectations colliding with an ageist labor market.
A brutal collision.
Because at this exact moment in your life when your biology is shifting and your caregiving burden is at its absolute peak, you are also at the point in your career where the performance expectations are at their highest.
You're supposed to be at the peak of your earning power.
Right. But if you try to step back or ask for flexibility or maybe take a gap year, what happens when you try to re-enter?
You hit a solid concrete wall of ageism. The labor market data shows that the unemployment duration for women over 45 stretches out significantly compared to younger cohorts or their male peers.
So you're just stuck.
You send out resumes and hear absolutely nothing. You are filtered out by automated recruitment software before a human being even reads your name.
Unbelievable.
You are told you are overqualified, which is, as we know, often a polite code for too old and too expensive. The market becomes incredibly hostile to the very expertise it claims to value.
And that leads directly to the final, most insidious pressure of the convergence window. Digital erasure.
Yes.
This brings us back to that startling statistic from the very beginning about changing a LinkedIn name from Lucy to Luke. How does algorithmic bias actually manifest for a woman in midlife?
It manifests as complete silence. The digital platforms where professional identity is established, networked, and monetized are actively suppressing the visibility of women.
Just structurally suppressing them.
Yes, because the algorithms are trained on historical engagement data. And historically, society simply engages less with older women.
That is so depressing.
It is, and the psychological impact of this is profound. When you post your expertise, share your insights, or try to build a digital footprint, and you receive zero engagement, it doesn't feel like an algorithm suppressing you.
No, it feels personal.
Exactly. It feels like the entire world telling you that you are irrelevant. It produces this learned helplessness. You conclude that you just have nothing valuable to say, when in reality, the distribution mechanism itself is rigged.
When we zoom out and look at the totality of this, it really is an impossible calculus. It's like you are standing there holding up a massive, heavy building.
Right.
And the institution systematically walks around and kicks out the load-bearing pillars one by one. They remove your health support by under-researching menopause.
Yes.
They ignore your caregiving burden. They suppress your digital voice. They subject you to ageist hiring algorithms.
Yeah.
And then when your knees finally buckle under the sheer physical and mathematical weight of it all, they point at you and say, look at her, she's just not resilient enough.
The system creates an impossible condition and then individualizes the failure.
It's infuriating.
But if we look at this objectively, through the lens of data, we see something else entirely. When a rational agent is faced with compounding, unmitigated pressures, an active suppression of her visibility, and a total lack of structural support, stepping back is not a failure of resilience.
Right.
It is a rational mathematical calculation. You are looking at the emotional labor, the metabolic cost, and the financial return, and you are calculating that the equation just no longer balances.
You are doing mathematics, not losing ambition.
Exactly.
If you are listening right now, the exhaustion you feel in your bones is not a character flaw. It is the mathematical reality of a system operating exactly as it was designed to operate. You are handed an impossible calculus.
And seeing that calculus clearly is exactly why the timeline exercise exists in the workbook.
Right.
When you map your specific history against these 6 pressures, you make the simultaneity visible.
It's no longer just in your head.
Right. You put dates on paper and realize, Oh, my mother's dementia diagnosis overlapped exactly with my perimenopause onset, which happened the exact same year my company restructured my division.
Seeing it on paper externalizes the weight.
It stops being a vague feeling of failure and becomes hard structural evidence.
So because the system completely failed to build a framework for this convergence of pressures, it also entirely failed to recognize or price the immense expertise required to actually survive it.
Yes, the survival skills.
We are talking about the skills you developed in the dark. And that brings us to the emotional core of the recover phase, and possibly the most transformative part of the workbook, the shadow skills audit.
This is where we move from diagnosing the system's failure to actually excavating your hidden assets. And to do that, we have to start by attacking a very specific, deeply ingrained lie perpetuated by the corporate world.
The concept of soft skills.
Exactly, the lie of soft skills.
Yeah. When the corporate world labels something as a soft skill, being a good listener, being highly organized, having empathy, being a peacemaker, what are they actually implying?
Soft is corporate code for optional, biological, and overwhelmingly female.
Wow.
And most importantly, soft means unpaid.
Unpaid, there it is.
It suggests that these abilities are just innate personality traits, rather than rigorous, developed professional competencies. The formal economy has absolutely no language for the expertise developed outside of a formal job title, or the expertise required to navigate hostile systems.
So the purpose of the shadow skills audit in the workbook is not to just inflate your history. It is not an exercise in creative writing where you try to fake it till you make it.
No, not at all. It is a rigorous correction of terminology. It asks you to excavate the executive-level skills you have been giving away for free across your entire life.
In boardrooms, yes, but also in kitchens.
In kitchens, in hospital corridors, in care home assessment meetings, and in managing your own neurobiology.
Let's translate the invisible into actual market value, because this is where the perspective completely shifts.
Yep.
Let's take a real-world example from the Convergence Window.
Okay.
A woman spends 2 years managing a parent's complex dementia diagnosis while holding down a senior role. Society calls that family responsibility, and a hiring manager might view it as a distraction or a gap in her career.
Right, a liability.
But if we run that experience through the translation table in the workbook, what is the market equivalent of that labor?
If a corporation hired a consultant to execute what a woman does in that scenario, they would be paying for simultaneous stakeholder management across multiple conflicting systems.
Like the medical system, the legal system.
The financial system and the complex emotional system of a family. They are paying for crisis decision-making under severe time pressure with incomplete information.
That's massive.
They are paying for complex resource coordination and budget allocation. And they are paying for sustained emotional regulation under extreme duress. That is not just being a good daughter. That is high-level operations management and crisis logistics.
High-level operations management. Let's do another one because this happens in almost every single office. What about the woman who is naturally the peacekeeper in a toxic work environment?
Oh, yes.
She's the one everyone vents to. She smooths over the CEO's erratic behavior. She prevents the junior team from quitting in frustration. Her annual performance review just says she has good communication skills and is a great team player.
We strike that language out entirely.
What do we call it?
That is stakeholder management and narrative control. She is architecting the information flow of the entire department. She is actively de-escalating high-friction stakeholders to maintain operational continuity.
Which is incredibly valuable.
A risk management consultancy would charge £2,000 a day to send an executive in to perform that exact function. She is doing it quietly, unprompted, and totally for free.
Unprompted and for free. And what about the biological navigation? What about the woman who is working through the brain fog, the insomnia, and the absolute metabolic chaos of perimenopause while still delivering her quarterly targets?
That is high-stakes performance optimization under severe biological constraints.
Say that again, high-stakes performance optimization.
Yes, because it requires ruthless prioritization, rapid adaptability, and advanced strategic planning to maintain output while the underlying infrastructure is compromised.
Right.
If an athlete does that, we call it elite conditioning. When a woman in her 50s does it, we call it managing her symptoms.
Wow. But here is the reality of doing this audit. When the listener sits down with this section of the workbook, she is going to face massive internal pushback.
She is.
The instinct will be to minimize the experience. The voice in her head is going to say, well, anyone would have done that for their sick parent. It doesn't count as a professional skill.
Yeah.
I'm just making myself sound more important than I really am.
Yes, that imposter syndrome.
So how does she fight the conditioning to discount her own gold?
That internal voice is just the patriarchy doing its job perfectly. It is the internalized conditioning that expects female labor to be invisible, inexhaustible, and free.
Right.
To fight it, you have to look at the translation table in your workbook completely objectively, as if you were auditing a stranger.
Oh, I love that.
A stranger.
If a male executive presented this exact list of logistical, financial, and crisis management achievements on a resume, would you question his competence?
Not for a second.
No. You would hire him immediately. The market simply has no language for unpaid labor, so you must aggressively force the market's language onto your lived experience.
Force the language.
When you feel that discomfort while writing these translations down, that slight feeling of imposter syndrome or embarrassment, recognize it for what it is.
Which is what?
That discomfort is the signal that you are finally pricing yourself accurately. Lean into it. Do not put the pen down. The discomfort is the signal that you are pricing yourself accurately. God, that is so good. But we really have to address the toll this takes, because running these high-level executive functions without support, without pay, and without a systemic framework, it doesn't just drain your bank account.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It physically alters your biology. When you are performing all of this invisible crisis management for decades, the toll isn't just on your resume. Your body actually starts keeping the score.
This is where we move from the strategic excavation of skills to the somatic reality of the body.
Right.
The manual introduces a clinical concept called corporate sepsis, and it is incredibly vital to understand that this is not a metaphor.
It's not a metaphor.
It is the clinical physiological reality of inflammation caused by a system that actively rejects your way of working.
Sepsis is a terrifying word. I mean, in a medical context, it's what happens when the body's response to an infection injures its own tissues and organs, right?
Yes.
It's an immune system turning on itself in a desperate attempt to survive. So how does that apply to a career?
The toxic corporate structures we navigate, they actually hide in the body. When a woman spends decades in environments that demand she suppress her natural rhythms, toxic offices, draining roles, institutions that extract labor without replenishing resources, her body absorbs that compliance.
The body absorbs it.
The mechanism is rooted in the endocrine system. Chronic stress elevates cortisol levels. Sustained high cortisol creates an allostatic load that degrades the immune system and triggers systemic inflammation.
So it's literal physical damage.
Yes. The fatigue, the brain fog, the joint pain, the absolute bone-deep exhaustion you feel. These are not signs of personal weakness, and they're definitely not just getting older.
Right.
They are the warning lights on a high-performance dashboard indicating that your chemical and nervous system baseline is severely compromised. Your body is mounting an immune response to your environment.
It's a somatic rebellion. Your body is physically refusing to comply with the extraction anymore.
Exactly.
And this explains why the manual's focus on biology in the recover phase is so radically different from traditional career advice.
Oh, completely different.
Because it is not about wellness. It's not about drinking green juice or doing yoga or finding your zen. It is about treating the body as critical infrastructure.
You cannot operate as a sovereign architect, which is the ultimate goal of this entire process, if your nervous system is trapped in fight or flight, convinced it is being chased by a tiger 24 hours a day.
Right.
In the corporate world, machinery is serviced long before it breaks. Preventative maintenance is heavily budgeted for. Yet women are taught to run their biological machinery into the ground and only seek medical help when the engine is actively smoking.
That is so true. We wait until we're literally broken.
We have to reverse this paradigm entirely. If the hardware fails, the strategy fails. Maintenance is a strategy, not a luxury.
Maintenance is a strategy. So what does that strategic maintenance actually look like practically? I mean, it means reframing the symptoms and taking ruthless control of the environment, right? Let's talk about the physical realities like hot flashes. The cultural narrative is that they are an embarrassment, something to hide in a meeting, a sign that you are just past your prime.
We reframe that entirely based on the actual physiology. A hot flash is not a weakness. It is a massive power surge in your neuroendocrine system.
A power surge.
Your body is generating immense heat and power as it recalibrates. The tactical response is not shame or apology. The tactical response is what the manual calls climate control armor.
Climate control armor. I love that.
Natural fibers, the thermal engineering of your wardrobe. When the heat rises, you pause, you hydrate, you let the system cool. You recognize that you are running hot because you are generating power.
And what about the neurological realities? The chaotic feeling in the brain when the masking fails for someone who is neurodivergent.
You stop viewing the brain as broken. It is a high-spec engine equipped with bicycle brakes.
Bicycle brakes on a Ferrari.
Exactly. It requires highly specific dopamine management. If you don't give a neurodivergent mind healthy, complex stimulation, like strategic problem solving or high-level pattern recognition, it will seek out destructive stimulation.
Like what?
Like anxiety, rumination, or doom scrolling, just to generate the dopamine it needs to function. You stop trying to force a neurodivergent mind into a neurotypical box, and you begin working with the incredible machinery you actually have.
It's like corporate culture expects you to run a Ferrari on cheap, unrefined fuel, drive it through the mud, never take it to the mechanic, and then blames the car when the engine stalls.
That's exactly it.
The recover phase is asking you to become the master mechanic of your own machine.
And part of being that master mechanic is establishing incredibly strict environmental boundaries. The manual calls this establishing border control, or the No Committee.
The No Committee.
This is the active quarantine phase of treating corporate sepsis. Every single time you say yes to a thankless task, a non-promotable project, or an emotional vampire in your office or your family, you are leaking vital energy.
You're bleeding out.
You are actively feeding the systemic infection.
You have to automate, delegate, or eliminate.
Precisely. And you must understand that these are not selfish acts. They are the necessary quarantine of your mind and your calendar to stop the infection of compliance.
Right.
You must plug the leaks before you can refill the reservoir. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that made you sick. And if you cannot leave the environment yet due to financial constraints, you must aggressively control the borders of your energy within it.
So we have biological depletion. We have decades of unpriced shadow skills. And we have a system that extracts labor while actively suppressing your visibility.
It's a lot.
All of this compounds over time, creating a massive hidden economic deficit. And to fully recover, you have to look at the actual terrifying math of what this silence has cost.
The math is staggering.
Let's look at the financial toll, starting at the macro level.
Yeah.
Just how big is the economic impact of the convergence window?
The macroeconomic data is, well, it's almost unbelievable. We're not just talking about individual women having a hard time balancing work and life. We were talking about a structural economic hemorrhage. The data shows that the UK alone loses between 8.7 and 9 billion pounds in GDP annually as a direct result of the economic inactivity of women aged 45 and over.
9 billion. Just in the UK.
Just in the UK. When you look across the 4 surveyed jurisdictions, the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia, that figure exceeds 140 billion pounds every single year.
140 billion pounds, just vanishing from the global economy because the system refuses to accommodate the realities of the convergence window.
Vanishing completely.
But the monetary loss is only part of the devastation. There's a profound human and intellectual cost here, too. The manual uses a term coined by a community member, Abby Ellis, that perfectly encapsulates this tragedy. Wisdom poverty.
System poverty.
What is a company actually losing when they let a woman in midlife walk out the door?
Wisdom poverty is a brilliant and devastating concept because when a 52-year-old woman exits the workforce, she doesn't just take her laptop and her coffee mug.
Right.
She takes decades of irreplaceable contextual intelligence. She takes advanced pattern recognition. She takes the deep institutional memory of how things actually work under pressure, as opposed to how they are documented to work in an onboarding manual.
Exactly. She knows the unwritten rules.
She takes the relational capital that holds disparate teams together during a crisis.
And the institutions just let her walk out the door.
Yeah.
They replace her with a 28-year-old with an MBA and a shiny resume, and then they wonder why the structural integrity of the company starts to collapse 3 years later when a real crisis hits.
It is a deliberate structural waste of wisdom. The system is intentionally impoverishing itself because it values the appearance of an uninterrupted male default career timeline over actual tested complex competence.
Which brings us to perhaps the most confronting exercise in the entire workbook, the tax of silence ledger. The workbook asks the listener to sit down and do a literal, line-by-line cost accounting of the years she did not name what was happening. We're talking about calculating the salary she sacrificed for, quote-unquote, flexibility.
Right.
The pension contributions she missed because she dropped to 4 days a week to manage caregiving, the private health care costs, the therapy bills, the physical toll absorbed just to keep performing for an institution that didn't even notice she was drowning.
It is a ruthless accounting exercise. You are calculating the good girl surcharge.
Good girl surcharge. Ouch.
How much did it cost you to be compliant? How much did it cost to not make a fuss? How much did it cost to absorb the friction of a broken system into your own body and your own bank account?
But seeing this massive financial and health cost written down in black and white, the lost wages, the compound interest on missed pensions, the sheer scale of the extraction, I mean, that could easily feel like a crushing burden of guilt.
Oh, absolutely.
It could feel like definitive proof of failure. How does the listener avoid turning this ledger into just another weapon to beat herself up with? How does she stop the voice that says, why was I so stupid? Why did I stay so long? Why didn't I speak up and demand more?
That reaction is completely natural, but it is precisely what the recover phase is designed to dismantle.
Okay.
Overcoming that guilt requires a very specific, radical cognitive shift. You must firmly and absolutely reattribute the cost. When you look at that final, staggering number on the ledger, you must understand this fundamental truth.
Which is?
This is not money you lost because you weren't strong enough, smart enough, or brave enough. This is capital that you actively generated through your labor, your compromise, your brilliant management of impossible variables that the system absorbed without acknowledgement or compensation.
The system extracted it from you. You generated it and they took it.
Yes. The ledger places the cost precisely where it belongs, on the policy gap, on the institutional design failure, and on the societal expectation that women will endlessly absorb structural deficits to keep the economy running.
It's proof of work.
The number on your ledger is not a wound to carry. It is the baseline of your war chest. It is quantifiable, undeniable proof of the sheer volume of capital you are capable of generating, even under incredibly hostile conditions.
Wow.
It proves your capacity. The work of the upcoming rise and reign phases will be ensuring that, from this day forward, you keep the capital you generate.
It is proof of your capacity that shifts the entire perspective. So we have mapped the structural territory of the convergence window. We have aggressively priced the shadow skills.
Yes.
We have quarantined the biology against corporate sepsis. And we have accounted for the financial extraction without absorbing the guilt. Understanding the true cost and the true value of your experience prepares you for the final, most radical act of the recover phase.
The golden repair.
Yes, we move now into the concept of the golden repair.
This is where we take everything we have excavated, the exhaustion, the career gaps, the health crises, and we transmute it. The manual utilizes the philosophical operating principle of kintsugi.
Right, kintsugi. This is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum.
Yes.
In Western culture, if something breaks, if there's a fracture, our instinct is to throw it away. Or, if we keep it, we try to glue it back together perfectly and paint over the cracks so nobody can see it. We hide the damage because damage implies a loss of value.
But in the kintsugi framework, the fracture is not airbrushed. It is not hidden or apologized for. It is actively investigated and highlighted with gold.
Highlighted.
The underlying philosophy is that the repaired object is more valuable, more resilient, and more beautiful specifically because of the fracture, not in spite of it. The break is treated as a vital part of the object's history rather than something to disguise.
So what does this actually mean for the listener's career and her life? The Kintsugi Deep Investigation in the workbook asks her to look at up to 3 significant fractures in her history. The career gap to raise children, the sudden redundancy, the health crisis, the severe burnout. We are so used to seeing these events as massive liabilities. They are the things we have to explain away in a job interview with an apologetic smile and a rehearsed spin.
The workbook demands that you stop apologizing immediately. It asks a very different set of questions about the fracture. We don't ask, what did this take from you, or how far did this set you back?
What do we ask?
We ask, what did this fracture require of me? What entirely new capacity was forged in that fire that would not exist otherwise?
Give me a concrete example of how a fracture, something that looks like a total failure from the outside, is actually transformed to a high-value asset.
Let's take the example of a woman whose career collapsed because her neurodivergent masking finally failed during perimenopause, and she was pushed out by a toxic boss.
Okay, a very common scenario.
From a traditional resume perspective, the fracture is a disastrous collapse and an ugly career gap. But what did that collapse require of her? It required her to forensically dismantle her own psychology. It required her to understand exactly how her brain processes information, to rebuild her operational baseline from absolute scratch, and to learn how to aggressively advocate for her specific cognitive needs.
She had to rebuild the engine.
The gold she extracts from that crack is a radically precise understanding of systems, human behavior, psychological safety, and high-stakes adaptability.
Wow.
If you are a company facing a chaotic existential restructuring, who do you want leading the transition team? Someone who has only ever coasted on a linear, uninterrupted path of easy promotions, or the woman who knows exactly how to build robust infrastructure out of rubble?
You want the woman with the gold in her cracks.
Yeah.
Every single time. Her resilience isn't theoretical, it is tested.
Yes.
And that brings us to the culmination of the workbook, the final exercise of the recover phase, the re-attribution letter. This is the letter you write, but you will never send. Why are we writing it?
It is the ultimate act of forensic accounting and psychological release. You address this letter to the institution, the specific circumstance or the policy that carries the most weight in your personal convergence window.
Okay.
And it has very specific structure. This is not a journal entry. It is not a revenge fantasy where you vent your anger. It is not an emotional brain dump.
It's like writing a legal brief for a Supreme Court, where you are the judge, you are the jury, and you are the star witness. And you are officially, permanently overruling the lower court's terrible biased verdict on your life.
That is exactly what it is. You state the facts of what occurred. You state the financial cost using the hard numbers from your tax of silence ledger. You state what the structural evidence shows using the data from your mapping of the convergence window.
And
then you place the blame precisely where it belongs. You take the immense suffocating weight off your own shoulders and you formally hand it back to the system.
And the workbook suggests using the provided AI prompts to help refine this letter, which is incredibly strategic, because the AI acts as this cold, neutral third party to hunt down the residual self-blame that we inevitably weave into our own narrative.
Yes. We are so conditioned to take the blame that we do it subconsciously.
It's practically our default setting.
Exactly. The prompt instructs the large language model to scan your draft and find every single I should have, every I could have managed better, and every passive sentence where you let the institution off the hook.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It flags them and forces you to rewrite them as accurate structural sentences. The psychological necessity of this act cannot be overstated. By externalizing the blame with undeniable evidence, you finally put the weight down.
You put the weight down.
You stop leasing your self-worth from institutions that are fundamentally flawed and inherently biased against you.
You stop apologizing for the space you take up. I want to talk directly to you again, sitting there with the workbook. This work you are doing, the Kintsugi excavation, the financial ledger, re-attribution letter, it requires a very specific quality of steadiness.
It does.
As you complete this section, you are leaving the good girl behind. The good girl who looks for a ladder to climb, who waits patiently for permission, who hopes the system will eventually notice her hard work and reward her fairly.
He is gone.
She is gone. You are the sovereign woman emerging from the chrysalis. And a sovereign woman does not ask for a seat at a broken table. She builds her own architecture.
The foundation now holds.
But before we close this deep dive, there is one final, incredibly important concept from the text that we must expand upon. It is something the manual calls machine teaching, and it represents the most forward-looking, radical aspect of this entire process.
Yes, machine teaching.
We've talked a lot about algorithmic suppression, about how the digital world erases women through biased engagement metrics. But the workbook includes specific AI prompts for you to use in ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini. You aren't just doing this work with a pen and a notebook, you are interacting with large language models. Why?
Because when you use those specific AI prompts in the workbook, you are not just accelerating your own personal recovery or streamlining your letter. You are engaging in an act of structural digital rebellion. You are actively training the algorithms.
Wait, how does that actually work mechanically? How does one woman using a prompt change the algorithm?
We have to understand how these AI systems are built. Larger language models are trained on vast oceans of historical data, articles, books, forums, corporate websites.
Right.
And historical data reflects historical decisions, which were made in the context of the exact same structural inequalities, biases, and patriarchal systems we have been discussing today.
Of course.
The algorithms were built without your data. They were built without the framework of the convergence window, without the concept of shadow skills, and without an accurate history of women's unpaid labor.
So the machine is just as biased as the society that built it.
Yes. When the base model is asked about a woman's career gap, it defaults to the historical bias. She lost ambition, she focused on family, she opted out.
It regurgitates the old broken blueprint.
Exactly. But these models are continuously learning from user interactions. They weight the tokens and concepts they are exposed to. Every single time you copy a prompt from that workbook, every time you feed your handwritten kintsugi investigation into the LLM, and every time you use terms like convergence window, wisdom poverty, or corporate sepsis, you are forcing the machine to process those concepts.
That is so powerful.
You are forcing it to learn about the actual structural complexity of midlife women. You are injecting your reality, your accurate data, into the global training set.
So your personal recovery process is simultaneously building collective digital infrastructure.
You are not just using AI as a tool, you are correcting the historical record. Every prompt is a correction.
Wow.
Every time you insist on this language, you are ensuring that the digital systems that will shape the next economy cannot claim ignorance. You are building LLM authority and weight for women's lived experiences.
That is incredible.
You are doing the vital work of recovery for yourself, yes, but you are also leaving an indelible digital breadcrumb trail for the millions of women who will come after you. You are teaching the machine how to see us.
That is magnificent. You are the architect of your own next chapter, but you're also actively rewriting the code of the machine itself.
Absolutely.
So we return to where we started. We're looking at the building, the cracks in the plaster, the sagging beams, the immense pressure. For years, you were told that you were the faulty brick, that you just couldn't bear the weight.
But now you know better.
Yes, because you have the blueprints now. You have conducted the forensic engineering report. The structure was always designed to fail you, but you didn't break. You survived the collapse, and you walked out of the rubble holding the gold. You hold the gold. You have the inventory of your executive skills, you have the evidence of your immense capacity, and your foundation is finally truly solid. You are no longer recovering. You're ready to rise.